As the Indiana basketball head coaching search continues, could Nate Oats from Alabama be the answer?
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. It is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you being here, making this your first listen or your first watch every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. A loaded show for you today. I'm excited for spring practice for Indiana football, and I'll tell you why coming up in the final segment. Plus, is there some fallout, maybe some hurt feelings with the whole Brad Stevens situation as he basically turns down publicly the Indiana job? Seems to be some people upset about that whole situation and what really happened, what they think happened. More on that in just a little bit. But the coaching search continues for Indiana. And I've told you that it's going to take some time. And I told you that I think Dawson and the people behind the scenes are going to handle this the best they can internally and handle the politics as good as they can, and he does a pretty good job at that. But I do think there are still names that we need to dive into, and names that could legitimately be an answer at Indiana. And the one that I've continued to see flying under the radar, but one that I think would be a home run, that big, splashy, sexy hire I've talked about, is Nate Oats from Alabama. Now, there are some pros, there are some cons, and then the ultimate question, will it happen? The pros are pretty obvious. A guy that came from Buffalo, he then is now at Alabama. Folks, this guy was a high school math teacher. You've probably heard that by now. They say it a lot because it's pretty significant news about him, to where he was a high school basketball coach. He was a math teacher, didn't really have any, I guess, aspirations to be a college coach, or maybe didn't think it was possible for him, right? I'm not going to go out and say, because I don't know, that he didn't want to be that. It probably just wasn't really on his mind of being an actual thing. And then he just started to get better and get more recognized, became an assistant there in Buffalo. Then he became the head coach after Bobby Hurley left. Then Alabama found him. And let's be real here for a second. If you dive into the history of Alabama basketball, there's not a whole lot of history to be had there. And so I believe that Alabama decided, when their in-state rival Auburn started getting good with the hiring of Bruce Pearl, Alabama said, okay, we got to do something. It's like the Indiana Purdue or Ohio State Michigan or whatever. I mean, pick whatever rivalry you want to. When one gets good, the other one has to make up for it. And I think that's exactly what Alabama did when they went and got Nate Oats. It was I'm not going to say questionable hire, but it was all right, good for them. See if it works out. Nobody really cared. He made them care. And he has made everybody care about Alabama basketball because they've got the money now, they've got the investment, and he's got the players. And he just took them to a Final Four and very well could take them to another Final Four this season. I like Nate Oats as a coach because he's an offensive mastermind. His offensive game plan is genius, I guess, but it's not anything special. He just gives his players freedom. He allows them to do whatever they want to do as long as it's within the confines of their offensive structure. They want to turn you over, they want to run and score in transition, and they want to shoot open threes or get to the rim. That's it. Those are the two shots they want. They want threes or shots at the rim. Nothing else. No elbow jumpers, no baseline floaters, right? No 20-foot jumpers with your foot on the line. No. They want you to shoot a three, or they want you to get to the rim and get fouled or lay it in or dunk the ball. And if you do that, you will fit in at Alabama. And look at the players they've had. Look at the ones they have right now. Man, Mark Sears is one of the best point guards in all of college basketball because he has the freedom to do what he wants. And they're getting transfers. They're getting high school recruits. They're getting anybody they want because of Nate Oats. And so you bring him in to Indiana, he would revive what has been a pretty abysmal offensive performance the last couple of years. He would revive that instantly because players want to play for him. He's the type of coach that recruits want to go and be with. And I think that would not only be the big name you need if you're Indiana, that would be the culture change you need if you're Indiana. So from IU's perspective on that side of things, I think he's a perfect fit. Now, he's very outspoken. He's very colorful in terms of how he coaches, how he acts. He has said some things in the past that may rub people the wrong way, but his past, as far as we know, is clean. It's clean. And so why doesn't it make sense for Indiana? Oh, that sounds great, right? You're probably thinking, oh yeah, that makes sense. Why hasn't Indiana made the call? Well, because he signed an extension with Alabama recently that keeps him there through 2030, where he's currently making $5 million a year. And by the end of that contract, he'll be making $7.5 million a year. His current buyout would be over $18 million. Not saying Indiana can't afford it, because we can. Not saying Indiana won't pay it, because we're probably going to have to pay somebody's buyout to come and leave their current job to come to Indiana, right? Whether it is Scott Drew or Nate Oats or Bruce Pearl or Mick Cronin or whoever the case may be, right? We're going to have to pay somebody's buyout. But I think the biggest hiccup on all of this is Nate Oats is doing just fine at Alabama. He's doing just fine in Tuscaloosa. And the real question would be, does he want to leave? What is the next step for him? He has made the same way Bruce Pearl did at Auburn, which is fascinating that we've talked about both of these guys now. What's fascinating is they took two jobs that were not destination jobs when they took them. Bruce Pearl's been there, I think over a decade now in Auburn, and Nate Oats has been there getting closer to that by the day. They took two jobs and programs that nobody cared about that were not destination jobs and have turned it into that. And so, yeah, money talks, sure. But, man, he built something there in Tuscaloosa. Final Four a year ago, and they're good enough to do it again this year. I don't know if he would leave right now. I don't know if Indiana is the one that gets him out of bed to go and leave what he built there. I think somebody probably is. I think there's a job somewhere that he might do that. I just don't know if it's Indiana. But from the Hoosiers' perspective, Nate Oats is the home run hire you're looking for. You're going to have to pay for him, but he's going to bring in an offensive game plan, an offensive strategy that will revive this program. He'll bring the energy, he'll bring the passion, and it would be one that IU would just love to have on the sidelines. Is Nate Oats, the head coach at Alabama. The question is, would he do it? Would he leave Tuscaloosa to come to Bloomington? All right, coming up here on Locked On Hoosiers, is there a fallout with the Brad Stevens stuff? I mean, some people really seem to be upset about this whole situation. We'll talk about it, what happened, what we think happened, and what people are saying happened. It's just not true. All that coming up here next on the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by TurboTax. This message is from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Now, Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for a 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed, all while you go about your day. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now, this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Welcome back into Locked On Hoosiers, your daily spot for all things Indiana athletics. Appreciate you being here. Hope you're having a good start to your week. More on Indiana football as I can't contain my excitement for spring practice, which we don't have the official dates yet, but we do have the spring game, and practice is right around the corner. So we'll talk more about that coming up in just a little bit. And before we get to this weird Brad Stevens situation, I'm going to ask you to do a couple of things. My YouTube watchers, by now, you know the drill. Like the video, use that thumb, hit it real quick, helps it get out there for more people to find it. Leave your thoughts down below. Is Nate Oats the guy for Indiana basketball to hire as their next coach? I want to hear your thoughts on Nate Oats down in the YouTube comments. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our show. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube. That will allow you to be notified and you'll never miss a new episode. Plus, you'll see our reels, or our shorts as they're called. You'll see our interactive polls that we post every day. All of that stuff you get to be a part of if you are a subscriber for free, by the way, on the Locked On Hoosiers YouTube channel. And if you're listening on audio, follow us, turn on your notifications, like it, leave a 5-star review. However you can help this show, I really do appreciate you doing that and appreciate you being a loyal listener and everydayer to the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. Well, this whole Brad Stevens situation was really exciting, really fun. We thought it was almost there, and then it got kind of ugly down the stretch. And Brad Stevens is catching a lot of flack for this, and I think IU's catching a lot of flack for this too, and a lot of reporters are catching a lot of flack for this because there was never really anything concrete about how this situation started, how it was going. And the only concrete thing was how it ended. And Brad Stevens took that into his own hands. And so you all saw the report, right? Or the update that, I guess it was a report that Jeff Goodman put out, that he said Brad Stevens told him, hey, it's not happening. I'm not taking that job. I'm not leaving. I like where I'm at, right? He is not leaving the Boston Celtics to take the Indiana job. And people were really upset about this because I'm going to call it the process, but I just don't think it was ever truly a process. I really don't. Just based off of the information I've been told, plus other things that I've seen and people I've talked to and things I've read. I mean, I just don't think this got off the ground as much as people think. I mean, there were people who said this was a done deal. There were some that said handshakes had been done, paper had been signed. All they needed to do was make the announcement and it was official. There are people that say that happened. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I don't think that ever happened. I don't think Brad Stevens even heard the full argument and heard the full pitch from IU because they made the call. Let's just be honest. We made the call to Brad Stevens. He was option number one. And yet again, as he did years ago, he said, no, I don't want it. I don't want. And look, I don't think it has a whole lot to do with IU specifically. I don't think Indiana is the problem. I think you're talking about a guy who hasn't coached college basketball in a decade. I think you're talking about a guy who stepped out of coaching completely when he was already in a pretty good gig. He was the head coach of the Boston Celtics, right? A top 3 NBA program historically, organization historically. He was the head coach of the Celtics. And he said, yeah, I think it's best for me to step out. The Celtics agreed. He stepped into a high management role. And he's done a great job, man. They've won an NBA championship with him in that role. Like, they've got some of the best players in the NBA, for those of you that keep up with that. I mean, they're pretty darn good, and he does a good job. So I think this whole situation says more about where Brad Stevens is and where his life is and where his career's at right now, rather than him saying, Indiana, no way. I'm not going to Indiana. Why in the world would I do that? How dare they pick up the phone and call me? I don't think that's what this was. I really, really don't. And that seems to be the reaction to a lot of Indiana fans who I think got our hopes up again. I do. I think a lot of you got your hopes up again. And I was hopeful too. I'm not singling anybody out. I was hopeful too. I knew what was happening. And when I saw the thing from Jeff Goodman, I wasn't overly surprised. And I think there are a lot of people who bought into what they were hearing and what they were reading. And I just don't think it ever got as far as you think it did, or as we think it did, really. And there should be no hard feelings towards Brad Stevens. He doesn't owe Indiana anything. He doesn't owe us to take this job. Like he's not supposed to do it, if that makes sense. We want him to. I think he'd be great. I think he would be an awesome coach here. I think he would be loved. I think he would be successful. I think he would enjoy it. But he's made it known that he likes what he's doing. His family likes it in Boston. He likes what he's doing with the Celtics. And maybe he just doesn't want to coach again. Now, if he takes another job somewhere else in the next year or two, then you have a reason to be upset, I would say. But I don't know. I think everybody is just really upset. Everybody's confused because there were so many reports and rumors, more rumors than anything else, about where the status was of this, right? If one thing is clear, if one thing is clear in this whole situation, he was Indiana's number one guy. He was their top choice. There is no doubt about it. And he didn't want the job. He turned it down again. And so where do we go from here? You got to move on. Indiana has to move on from this. And I think they have, and I think they are. There's still big names out there that we've talked about, some that we haven't, right? Some on the smaller side, like a McCollum that we've talked about. Maybe some assistants. I've said it. I've told you I don't think that's going to happen. I think Indiana goes and pays a buyout somewhere to go get a big-time head coach right now. And whether it be Mick Cronin, whether it be Dusty May or Scott Drew, right? Those types of names are still floating around. Chris Beard floating around. Indiana's got to move on. And I think us as a fan base, we do too. We wanted Brad. It just didn't happen. And it's not going to happen. And we need to move on from that. And I hope he continues to be successful. I hope he stays with the Celtics. And I hope that they continue to do their thing. And I hope that IU as a fan base, as an organization, as a program can just move on. They said no. Now we move on. You asked her to the prom. She said no. All right, cool. Let's go find another pretty date to bring in and take to the prom, right? And that's where Indiana stands because we're still good looking. We still got our suit. We still got our nice shoes. We still got our nice looking bow tie. We're still a hot pickup. We just got to go find the right one. We got to go find the right match, the one that will say yes, the one we can afford, and the one that will turn this program around. But remember, I've told you the difficulties of what we're doing right now. We're trying to hire a coach from somewhere that's currently coaching their basketball team and more than likely is coaching their basketball team to get to the NCAA tournament. Some of these coaches are guaranteed locks to make the tournament. Others are still fighting to make the tournament. And so that's really hard to do, to have conversations with coaches or their agents or their camps, right? And get a decision made right now in the season, which is why I've told you I think it's still several weeks away until this decision is made. Doesn't mean that's true. Doesn't mean that's going to how it's going to play out. But I just feel that that's where we're headed. So with Brad Stevens, you tried, you failed, you move on. And there's still big names like Nate Oats that I think Indiana should pick up the phone and make the call to. All right, coming up in our final segment here on the Locked On Hoosiers podcast, I am so excited for Indiana football spring practice. I can't hardly stand it. I'll tell you why coming up next in our final segment right here on Locked On Hoosiers. All right, final segment here on Locked On Hoosiers. Appreciate you being here. Again, making this your go-to spot, your daily listen or your daily watch for everything Indiana. And while we don't have dates for Indiana spring practice just yet, we have the date of our spring game, right? You've got that coming up in the next several weeks. That'll be in April. And look, Indiana still, as of right now, doing the spring game, making it public, possibly streamed, televised. I haven't seen a whole lot of information on that just yet, but what a weird trend. I say weird, but it makes sense to me on spring games in general in college football, which, look, I have to remind people every year, a spring game is just a glorified practice. That's literally all it is. It's a live practice. And people seem to get way too bought in, way too invested on what they see in the overall results, I guess, of a spring game. That's not what it's about. I like to look at offensive line rotation. I like to look at receiver rotation. I like to look at linebacker sets. I like to see who's out there when and what they're doing and the different formations that they run when they're there. That's what spring games are for. Well, man, there's a growing trend right now in college football where, believe it was Nebraska, right? Who said, to heck with this. We're not putting that thing on TV. You're not coming. We're not putting it on TV. We're getting tampered with as much as it is. We're not going to give you any more ammunition to come after us. And that's what Nebraska decided. Others are doing it too, and very well could become a trend in college football. But as of right now, we have Indiana spring game. We're just waiting on spring practice to get started. And man, I'm not just saying it. I genuinely cannot wait for Indiana football to get started. And I feel like a lot of you are in that same boat as well with how basketball season's fizzling out, right? We got the coaching search, but it's probably looking like another year where we're not going to be in the NCAA tournament, which is depressing. But with a signing class that Indiana brought in, a signing class of 42 total players, okay, in 2025, that's 19 transfers, and including 19 transfers, 14 freshmen. You come in with this class, and I just feel like you have a lot coming in, but you have several big transfers. You have several nice freshman recruits coming in. Plus, you have a new quarterback in the room. You've got new running backs. You have a new tight end. You have a brand new looking offensive line. You're 2 All-Americans on the defensive side. Plus, I think several starters on the defensive side that you brought in through the portal and young puppies that I think can make an impact down the road. Man, the talent is going to be there on this team. And I'm going to preach that from right now. Already have, really. I'm going to preach that until the season kicks off, until the season is over, that Indiana will have the talent to get back to the college football playoff. I genuinely believe that. And I hope you understand I'm not blowing smoke here. I genuinely believe it. And maybe I'm IU blind. Maybe I'm blind from our colors and our logo and our team and my fandom. Cool. Let me be blind, because I truly believe it. When I dive into this roster, which we're going to do over the next several weeks into spring practice and as it goes on, I believe in what Cignetti has built in just 1 year. I believe in what you bring back, what you bring in through the portal, and what you signed out of high school. I think it's competitive. I think it's good enough to compete and try to get back there. Is it just a home run guarantee? No doubt about it. We're making the playoff. No, it's not. There are very few teams that have that. But I think Indiana's got the team to do it. Schedule's tougher this year. There's no doubt about it. And we're not sneaking up on anybody. We've talked about that with my buddy Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On College Football. Go check out his podcast after this. But I believe that you've got the coaching staff and the dudes to make it happen. And I can't wait. I can't wait for the position battles. I can't wait for just the buzz around the program. And man, how long has it been when there has been legitimate excitement for spring practice at Indiana? Because even last year, right, you had a new head coach. Sure, yeah, it was fun with Curt Cignetti, but we were like, let's see what happens. It's spring practice. We'll get through the summer. We'll get to the season, and we'll just kind of see what happens. Nobody cared last spring. The excitement of a new coach was there, but there was no, oh man, look, we're going to get a new quarterback. We're going to look at position battles. We're going to look at this. We're going to look at that. Like, that wasn't there. It wasn't there. But now it is. This is the first time, maybe in my lifetime, that we've actually just had legitimate anticipation of spring practice. And I hope you fall into that boat. Let me know in the YouTube comments if you're watching right now. Let me know your excitement level, 1 to 10, man, of where you stand for spring practice starting up again. I don't have official dates. If I'm missing it, please let me know. I don't see them anywhere yet, but it's coming up in the next several weeks. And, you've got March and you got spring break. There's a lot of things going on in there, but this team's going to hit the field very soon. And I can't wait for Curt Cignetti and the boys to get out there and try to get back to a college football playoff in 2025. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers. Again, thank you so much for being here. I cannot stress enough how much it means to me that you show up each and every day. Be sure, if you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave your comments down below, and like the YouTube video. And for my audio listeners, follow us, turn on notifications, do whatever you got to do to never miss an episode of the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. We're back tomorrow, Hoosier fans. So until then, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.